today, like all the webinars each month, the primary focus will be on the topic of the article, which of course in this case was a second article on Rahu-Venus, Venus-Rahu periods. The first article is emphasizing the way in which it can be relationship giving, oftentimes bringing a significant love affair, very often leading to marriage. And we saw many, many examples of those, and I shared with you predictions I'd made on that basis that were fortunate to come out. This particular article, again, focused more on a different aspect of what Rahu-Venus and Venus-Rahu can bring, meaning it can oftentimes prove to be a very, very significant, even you might say life-defining time in a person's life, and you saw all those examples. So this is going to be the focus of our topic, but as usual, we're doing Jyotish, and so we're going to be discussing charts in general that we're going to be looking at. So without further ado, let me share my screen. So this is a mystery man for the moment, but when I share with you later whose chart it is, you'll probably recognize it. And it's a chart that in some ways can fool you, but first of all, what strikes you about it, or what are some might say distinguishing features? Hmm?
Exalted Venus.
I think one of the first things that catches your eye, particularly given what our topic is here, is the exalted Venus. And is it just an exalted Venus, or is there any other thing notable about this Venus for this chart?
It's a Yoga Karaka.
It's the Yoga Karaka, right? So it's an exalted Yoga Karaka in the second house, which is going to be good for what?
Family, wealth.
Family, certainly wealth.
Well,
Well, if anybody remembers the chart of J.P. Morgan, he was Aquarius Lagna and had the ninth Lord Yoga Karaka planet placed in the second. A very different chart in a lot of ways, nowhere near the level of wealth, but very, very, very good level of wealth in this person's life, partly due to this combination, not the only thing that contributes to that. What else?
Mars is exalted in Cancer, and it aspects Jupiter, which is debilitated in Capricorn.
Well, I think you may have meant to say that Mars is debilitated.
Oh, sorry.
But
Sorry.
we understood what you wanted to say.
Sorry. And the two debilitated planets mutually aspect each other,
Now,
which can give fantastic results.
right. I've been questioned about this principle before, and I swear by it, and I've shown examples in my articles, and I believe this chart, when you find out who this is, and the fact that they've been running their Jupiter major period, you'll see that, this principle, that it changes their debilitation status considerably, and the kind of results that they can actually give. Would be another example of this, but let's just focus in on this. First of all, Mars, since you mentioned Mars first, is there any other source of effective cancellation for it?
yes. Saturn is its own place, more aspected by Moon.
Yes, so the dispositor Lord, right, is aspecting onto the debilitated planet, which is one of the more effective factors for cancellation. And then what about Jupiter?
Saturn is with Jupiter.
So I see Rohit has joined us. Welcome. And, it hasn't taken him long to make a comment.
And we have Frasha's exception happening here too, don't we?
Hold on, while I give Rohit a hard time here, Chuck. Okay? Yes, he's absolutely right. Saturn being with Jupiter is an effective force in cancellation.
And that falling in Kendra from the moon, not from the Lagna, but from the moon.
Right. Both planets, right, are
yes.
falling. It's very interesting. I could have used this chart. I didn't. I could have used this chart in my article, Enigma Wrapped in the Mystery, all about conditions under which debilitated planets can give good results. So we see that these planets, Jupiter and Mars, really aren't giving the weak results. And if when you think about who this is, or when you learn who this is, you'll see that that's the case.
So Mark,
yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. With Mars being debilitated in Dustana and the Lagna Lord strong in its own sign, is this a form of process exception as well?
Well, that would certainly raise that question, wouldn't it?
Sure.
And I believe that it is. I believe that it is. And, the proof's always in the pudding, meaning what kind of results did these planets give, right?
Right.
And, we'll get into timing here in a moment.
These planets are forming some really good Dhan Yoga and Raj Yoga, which definitely adds to that whole puzzle.
Well, why don't you speak to that a little bit, Ruby?
Mars, we've already mentioned Yoga Karaka, and Saturn right there, the Lagna Lord. So that itself is a great Raj Yoga. And Jupiter being a Dhan Karaka for this ascendant ruling the second as well as the 11th, it just, there's quite a few Raj Yogas and Dhan Yogas on that 6-12 axis.
But it's the same, but at the same time, it's a 6-12 axis, right? But still, the combination for, and this reminds me a little bit of the horoscope of Whitney Houston this way, where she also had Aquarius Lagna Saturn going to the 12th, but in good angle trine combination. The Saturn-Mars combination here is, of course, a 110 combination, right? And, of course, Jupiter is the Dhan Yoga, but curiously is in the 12th house, but also what other yoga is forming here with Jupiter of some significance?
Kesri.
We'll call it Kesri Yoga because Jupiter's not falling in an angle from both the moon and the Lagna. And, not the best Kesri Yoga by any means, but still Kesri Yoga, which has some, implications in terms of the kind of results that Jupiter major period can bring. Any other observations here then?
Mark, just the fact that the Lagna Lord is aspected by Jupiter in its own sign, the ascendant beneficially hemmed on both sides, that really boosts up the quality of this horoscope.
It's not a pure benefic hemming, right? It's not a pure benefic hemming, but at the same time, it's the Lagna Lord strong in its own sign.
Right.
So, I believe there is some effect that way. Go ahead.
Yep. And I was going to say that we also have an exalted sun. And so then, and Sun and Venus together are Shiva-Voshi Yoga. So that helps Venus as well.
Good. One of the things that favorably qualifies Venus, which by itself is Yoga Karaka, right, is the fact that there's a good Voshi Yoga here, strong natural benefic, without affliction, or I'm sorry, it does have the aspect of Saturn. Falling, it adds strength and luster to it, which has ramifications when we start talking about the Rahu-Venus period. One more, somebody said the exalted sun, but what's curious about this exalted sun? Anybody see anything that would maybe temper this a little bit?
It's debilitated in the Navamsha.
Good, Purushottam. It's debilitated 22 degrees. It's debilitated, in the Amsha. Okay. Well, that's, I think, mostly what we wanted to.
Mark, there is also a negative to Jupiter in the sense that it's the Lord of the 2nd and the 11th in the 12th, with conjunct Saturn a malefic, aspected by Mars a malefic. Right. It appears to me as an example of Daridra Yoga again.
Well, this is what's interesting about this chart. It fulfills some of the definition both for Nishwa Yoga and Daridra Yoga, those unfavorable house yogas. But, with an exalted benefic in the 2nd house, can it really be Nishwa Yoga? The idea, no, it can't. Right? And, ironically, given the combination with Jupiter where it's with the first Lord, so it's a question mark, right? It's a question mark. But let me tell you that it did not bring Daridra Yoga. When you see who this is, you'll know what I'm talking about. And there's reasons for that too. But yes, it technically qualifies for that definition, but then that's why you have to weigh things up and consider things carefully before making any interpretation around that. Okay?
Mark, can I please ask a question very quickly?
What can Dana yogas do for you in the 12th house?
Income from abroad?
Sure.
Giving away wealth, charity.
Yes, both. Very good. You were saying?
Mark, can I quickly ask a question? If, especially with these unfavorable yogas, if any of the house lords fall in a dushtana, but again aspecting onto its own house, and secondly, if they are in an exchange, does that tamper the yoga, change the yoga completely?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's why these things can't be interpreted in a push button sort of way, right?
Okay.
They have to be assessed, weighed up, different factors considered. There's all in any judgment within Jyotish, and I think I've brought this out in some of the articles, is that you have what we call thesis. You see something that may have some indication, so that's thesis, right? But then then you have counter thesis, meaning is there anything that mitigates against that or counterindicates that? And then between those two, you have to produce synthesis. It is based on the fact that there's one indication, but then a counterindication. Then you have to synthesize what that could mean. So now coming to the Rahu-Venus period. Okay, coming to the Rahu-Venus period. Just based on the Rashi, what would you say about that period and why?
It's something to do with career taking off.
Well, you're absolutely right, Roberto. Good for you. And what basis did you? How did you? First of all, results of the major period of Rahu. Okay. What kind of results is the major period of Rahu going to give, and why?
The sun's is deposited by the sun, so it's going to give the sun's results.
It's going to give the sun's results, right? Which it's exalted in the birch house and weakness in the Vamsha, but still. And think about which house the sun goes in. Third house.
Third.
Okay.
Lot of
know?
This person started something related to his career in this period, and all of a sudden.
Well, that's true. that is true.
And the simple logic for that is that if you make Rahu the Dasha Lord, Venus becomes the 10th Lord and the 3rd Lord, and Rahu is giving the results of the of Sun, which is again in the third house aspects are coming over and over again. So starting something new in career there.
And
Well,
it is conjunct 8th Lord, Mercury.
Good. This is very good perception of yours because, applying Dasha Lagna, the Venus subperiod becomes even more significant because it related to career, because it becomes the 10th Lord from Dasha Lagna, right?
Yeah.
It comes in the 8th house, but an exalted 10th Lord from there, right? And we saw that, Rahu is giving the results of the sun, some level of exaltation in the 3rd house. And whose nakshatra is, whose nakshatra is Venus in?
Mercury.
Where does it go?
3rd house.
3rd house. You have any idea what this person's occupation is?
Writing, author, acting.
Actor.
Actor. He's an actor. He's an actor. Another one of my huge collection of movie stars. Folks, this is the chart. This is the chart of George Clooney. This chart of George Clooney, who in his major period of Rahu, subperiod of Venus, got his big breakthrough role. He started appearing in the very popular TV show ER, which stands for emergency room. Right? Think about the placement of Venus here in the 8th house from Dasha Lagna as the 10th Lord, and aspected by Saturn. So, this is the chart of George Clooney, which could maybe fool you a little bit if you didn't understand how to interpret this combination of Jupiter, Saturn, Moon, and Mars, especially in terms of the debilitation of Jupiter and Mars. Because, of course, after Rahu, what would he run?
Jupiter.
But you know, if you read about his life, it's very foreign-based. You see, you know, he has a villa in Italy. He's now living in England. He's now
Along with
living
his wife, who's foreign based.
foreign-based, and where do you see that? Where do you see the foreign wife?
Seventh
Rahu
house.
in the
Sun,
seventh.
Rahu.
Rahu in the 7th.
Rahu in the 7th house. And so, you know, this is, but then, you know, what did you know, you all read the article. If we're going to get these kind of life-defining moments from Rahu, Venus, I was talking about different parameters or different observations I had about what typically has to be the case if that's going to be true. And, you know, it has to do with the condition of Rahu and Venus, you know, and the results they give, of course, but what other real factor did I show over and over again? You remember what we have to see in addition here?
Connection to the Lagna.
Connection to the Lagna. Well, okay. I'm not sure about that one, but you know, what I was emphasizing is connection in D10. Remember? Connection in D10. What do you see here?
Yeah.
Note Venus's condition here.
Yep.
What kind of combination does Venus-Mars give for this Lagna?
Dharma
Wonderful
Karma
Raja
Ripa
Yoga.
Raja Yoga.
9, 10. And of course, you know, the connection between, Sambandha between Venus and Rahu. Yeah?
Plus, Sun adds to the whole picture, being the Lagna Lord.
Sure it does. It's a 1. You know, if you're taking angle time combinations, it's 9, 10, 1.
Right.
You can throw in Saturn as another Kendra Lord. If you want to
Right.
leave that. With Rahu.
And of course, Venus is also the 3rd lord, so it brings the acting side of things in.
Yes. So, you know,
And
this
can we also say that because of the aspect of Mars on Rahu, it's also a Nicha Bhanga Raja Yoga?
yes. Well, it certainly cancels Rahu's ability here. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I laid out those parameters or those observations of mine in the article, and actually I wasn't even aware of this example when I wrote that article, and here this example I came across yesterday fulfills exactly everything that I was saying there about how you identify particular Rahu and Venus-Rahu periods that are going to be exceptional and bring potentially an exceptional life-defining moment in a person's life, which it was for him. This is where his career really started taking off after Rahu-Venus. Okay, so now we'll look at this next chart. All right. And just again, some observations.
Venus is again exalted.
Venus is again exalted.
In the Kendra, so it forms Malavya Yoga.
It's giving Malavya Yoga.
You have an exalted moon, an exalted sun.
Right. And what's similar between the chart previous in the chart,
Jupiter.
in fact, these people were born about a month apart. Clooney and this person was born about a month apart, which is why you see a lot of the same situations.
Debilitated Jupiter, whose debilitation is cancelled.
That's it.
All right.
And whose results is Rahu giving again?
Sun.
Sun, which is involved in a very high quality Shubh Ubhichari Yoga.
Well, moon's kind of a malefic here, right?
Well, you know, this is a point of interest. I would normally, if that's just any old moon, Chuck, I would say no, you're not going to get. And you know, technically, you know, you're going to get the benefic hemming or the Shubha Vichara Yoga from Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus. But the moon here being in its exaltation sign, I think we do have to count it, right? Question mark. I'm not insisting on it. You know, regardless, you've got the good Shubha Vosha Yoga, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
whether that's helping to qualify the Venus and Mercury again in this case. And so, yeah. What else? Any other observations? Yeah.
That is a malefic Durdara Yoga, moon hemmed by Sun and Mars.
The moon does get hemmed here. The sun's hemming of it, mild, right? Mild.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The only reason I said it's a very high quality because Sun is very, very exalted.
It is.
Being the ninth lord in the five, that itself is a Raj Yoga. Venus has strength, moon exalted. I mean, it is, you would have to treat this as a very...
I'll go with it, okay?
Okay, there's my approval. Okay, thank you.
I'll go with it. No problem. So you see some similarities to what we previously. This is the many of you won't remember this name unless you're an American football fan. There was a quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals named Boomer Esiason, right?
Absolutely.
Who was I think it was in 1988, was it? 1989, he was he was an all-star quarterback, but in 1989 he was the actual player of the year for the National Football League in the U.S. And you want to take a guess as to what period and sub-period that happened?
Rahu-Venus.
Rahu-Venus. You're so good. Yes, it was Rahu-Venus. But you note the similarity to the previous chart, right? Because Rahu is giving the results of the sun again, exalted, giving Raja and Dhan Yoga here, Trikona Raja Yoga in this case, and then Venus is a natural benefic with the 10th Lord, right? And
Mark, this concept of Trikona Raja Yoga is something new. I would say that the position of Sun as the 9th Lord in the 5th is just a Dana Yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, if you look in Parashurahora, all right, actually Trikona Raja Yoga is more when 5 and 9 are combining, okay? 5 and 9 are combining, particularly if they're combining in angles or trions. You'll see that there, all right? By extension, if the 5th Lord is in the 9th or the 9th Lord is in the 5th, then you're going to have some of that quality, both Raj and Dhan Yoga.
Okay.
Both Dhan and Raj Yoga.
Mark, since I stay in New Jersey, I know a little more about Boomer Esiason. Let me just tell you, very interesting because of this chart. He made even more money after his playing career through broadcasting.
As a sports broadcaster, yeah.
He has one of the longest running radio shows and has been with CBS on the NFL show for the longest time. And it's all happening in his Jupiter and I think now probably Saturn period.
Right. And what house and what house Lord rules broadcasting?
Third house.
Third house. And so now you said it was happening in Jupiter and Saturn, but now use those as a dasha lagna. What happens to the third house?
10th Lord becomes exalted in the third house along with Mercury.
That's it.
and what I find even more interesting is that the third Lord goes to the second house of speech. He has had a radio show, one of the longest running radio shows in New York, New Jersey.
Well, you're adding color here. Thank you, Rohit. This I didn't know. I knew he was a very successful sports broadcaster. I didn't know about the radio show. But this is the brilliance of Jyotish and the way in which you have to integrate views of a particular period and sub-period from Dasha Lagna with the natal Lagna. And it's not always easy, but you can see here that, from birth Lagna, how Jupiter and Saturn can give good income from a performance from sports broadcasting in this case, but then also how powerful the third house becomes from Dasha Lagna, in which Jupiter now becomes the third lord itself. Okay? Very, very interesting. And, seeing the Shamsha here, this is not a case in which Rahu, Venus are sambandha, right? But notice the powerful positions of these grahas. What do you note about Rahu here? Which results it's going to give?
Saturn and Mars.
Saturn and Mars. Saturn's the Lagna Lord in the 10th, right?
Right.
What kind of planet is Venus for this Lagna?
Yogakaraka planet, Venus-Mercury exchange there.
That's it. You see it. Okay. You see it. So, I didn't mean to imply by those parameters that invariably when Rahu-Venus or Venus-Rahu, produces some momentous time in a person's life, professionally, achievement-wise, that there always going to be some banda. But if not sambandha, you'll see something like this, meaning you'll see that each of those grahas in their own right have strong and powerful positions within that D10. Right? Just another example that again I wasn't even aware of before I wrote the most recent article of Rahu Venus, really identifying and defining or timing a very momentous time in personal life. It was the peak of his career as a football player, at least, right? When he was the NFL Player of the Year. Questions
Just an observation, Mark. In D10, Rahu is debilitated, and its debilitation is not cancelled.
No, it's true.
But then it becomes Vargottama.
Is it? No.
No, it is not.
Jupiter, right? Oh, sorry, you're talking. Okay.
Rahu.
Well, but it's going to give the results of Saturn, which is going to give Raja Yoga, Lagna Lord in the 10th. And actually, how does Rahu give Raja Yoga? It's going to be in an angle or a trine connected with a Lord of the opposite variety, right? So here it's in an angle, and it's under the influence of two trine lords. Saturn being one as the first lord, Mercury being another as the fifth lord.
Yep.
But, you're right. There's no a real obvious source of cancellation if you take Rahu as its Scorpio's debilitation sign. Okay, moving on.
Mark, I have a question on that. So, if Rahu's debilitated, well, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What?
Can we say Ketu is debilitated as well?
Well, again, if you follow Parashara Hora, Rahu and Ketu get their exaltations in Taurus and Scorpio, and their debilitation in the reverse.
So, if we take that in consideration, can we say two debilitated planets aspect each other, or not really because they're opposite?
No. It's a nice try, Chuck.
Well, just wondering.
But in that case, their debilitation would always be canceled.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're always opposite points to each other. That's wonderful. I love it.
If I were to stretch it to that extent, the only thing I would say is that since it's going to give the result of Mars, it's the debilitated third lord, which would have the Raj Yoga effect.
No, yes, right. Right, but what I like to say is reality counts. Okay.
Okay.
Theory is one thing, but reality is the other. And it's the divisional chart; it's not the main chart. So, the Rahu in the birth chart gives the results of the exalted sun.
Just one more observation, Mark. In both the charts, the earlier chart of Clooney and the current chart, the relative position of Rahu and Venus is not good. Venus is always they are in 8-6.
No, they're not. It's true.
Venus is in the 8th from Rahu, and Rahu is in the 6th from Venus.
No, they're in a 6-8 relationship, Ben. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay.
So that doesn't sort of mar this yoga's combination?
Well, it may. We don't know what else was going on in their life during that time, but it's like you can't any interpretive principle. You don't want to apply it rigidly. Okay, meaning 6-8 relationships between a period and sub-period lord won't always produce a bad period. It just won't. and you know, these are two examples of that. And there's always reasons for that too, right?
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
some period lord falling in the eighth from a period lord, you know, can always bring some big changes and shifts in a person's life, which you might say they did, but in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
In a good way.
Also as he said, there might have been certain other incidents which were not so good, and we
I
are
don't
not
know.
aware of.
Don't know what else was going on in their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They could have been having a you know, extramarital affair that was destroying their marriage. I don't know. You know?
Possible, quite possible.
Quite possible. You know, I don't know. But you know, what I do know is that these were very significant periods in these people's lives as far as their professional. In this case, we have to really look at the 10 for that. And even here, it's in the 6-8 relationship. But
That's right.
But you know, what you want to see is, when you see that, what you also need to see is that Rahu is in an angle and Venus is in a Kendra, and both of them give Raja Yoga. I'm sorry, you know, Rahu is in an angle and Venus is in a trine, and both of them give Raja Yoga. That's what I'm highlighting here. Okay, let's go on. So now, just take a moment to study this chart, and we're not just focusing on Rahu, Venus. Remember, we're seeing the chart as a whole, and any what might be notable features, significant yogas in particular, either by house lordship or Graha yogas.
9-10 Raja Yoga in the 5th house.
Now there's a doozy, huh? So, and what, you know, further qualify this, so this is a 9-10, you know, Lord of the 9th, Lord of the 10th, combining in the 5th house. Mars is what kind of planet here?
It is in its own house.
Raja Yoga Karaka.
Raja Yoga Karaka.
Yeah.
And then obviously Swakshetra. And what makes Jupiter very powerful here?
It is in its
Exalted in
own.
Navamsha.
It's goes into its exaltation sign in Navamsha. Very good. So highly significant Raja Yoga here. Very well placed Raja Yoga, since it goes to the 5th trine. And now see it from the moon.
Yes, another 1-9 Raja Yoga, isn't it?
Even more powerful, now falling in the 9th house.
9th house, yes.
You won't see this very frequently. Do you think this person has some level of fame?
Oh God, yeah. Immeasurable amount of fame.
He doesn't, but you know, that's just, you know, the tip of the iceberg. Well, not the tip of the iceberg, it's a big part of the iceberg, but there's a lot more to the iceberg here. Someone want to identify any other, how about another yoga for very high status here?
Buddhiti Yoga? Sorry, no. What I meant to say was Shubho-Bichari Yoga. Sorry.
Now here's your real Shubho-Bichari Yoga, okay? No question about it, right? You've got, and then qualification of the yoga. Venus have any source of strength there?
Vargottama.
It's Vargottama. All right. And then what becomes the focal point of the Shubho-Bichari Yoga?
The 2nd house, the 2nd lord.
The 2nd lord does, that's for sure, but which house?
3rd house.
Third house.
3rd house. 3rd house becomes the focal point of that. And that moon get any brighter?
It's pretty bright.
Come back to the pillar of life. Lagna Lord. Who's the Lagna Lord here?
Moon.
Moon, where does it go?
Full moon in the 9th.
In the 9th.
Almost a perfectly, you know, the best moon is when it's just about to come to complete fullness.
And also aspected by Jupiter, the Lord of the 9th house.
It's its own sign Lord.
Yeah.
Right.
Also Saraswati Yoga from the Ascendant.
Beautiful. You go to the head of the class for that one, Chuck. And think about the qualifications of this Saraswati Yoga. We already saw that Jupiter is in its exaltation sign in Navamsha, a part of these powerful, powerful Raja Yogas, both from the Lagna Lord and the Moon. And now we saw that Venus is Vargotama. So very strong Saraswati Yoga, which is quite appropriate here when you find out who this person is.
With the Lagna Lord being full in the ninth house, aspected by its dispositor, a strong Jupiter, and the Lagna being aspected by Jupiter, and I don't see any malefic influence. Could we say this is the Jamara Yoga, the first house positive yoga?
It most certainly is. It's a brilliant example of it. Because as you say, it's unblemished. Now think about that. The Lagna Lord in the ninth has a perfectly full moon, Jupiter's strong aspect on it as the ninth Lord, aspecting onto the Lagna as well, with no malefic influence either on the Lagna or the Lagna Lord. Would you design a better Tattva Yoga? Jamara Yoga. Good catch.
It's a combination, and it happens on all full moon days. Moon is extremely bright and strong, but it will also have the aspect of a mild malefic sun.
Well, yeah, that's not going to be a factor.
It won't be. Okay.
We're not going to split hairs on that one. You know, what would you rather have a bright full moon unaspected by the sun?
No, we can't. We can't.
Would you rather have a dark moon unaspected by the mildly malefic sun? There's no question. But think of how think of this focal point there into the third house, right? Where you've got this, Shubha Yoga, sun focal point, as sun as the second lord, Venus as a Vargotama, planet of artistry in the second. You've seen this horoscope before. Some of you, if you're in my Graha Yoga program, you have any idea whose chart this is. I'll just give you a clue. They're a vocalist. Luciano Pavarotti.
Wow.
This is the chart of the very famous operatic star, but not just operatic star. He crossed over into, he's got very successful recordings out of the realm of opera as well. It just is, one of the greatest voices, tenors of all time, really. Right? And then, so in what dasha did he start life?
Mercury.
Right. In what balance of dasha approximately?
He must have got, I think only 1/3 was gone, so he probably would have gotten at least 10 years of it, more than 10 years of it.
And then followed by how many years of Ketu?
7 years.
Then what happens?
Venus.
Right? Venus. And it was in this period that he becomes this huge operatic star. He made his operatic debut. Would you like to have an idea about what the sub-period was?
Rahu.
I tell you, I can't put anything over you guys. It was, in fact, Venus-Rahu. Now, whose results does Rahu give?
Of Jupiter.
Jupiter. Who else's?
Sun.
Mars. No.
Not Sun. Not Sun.
Not Sun.
Sorry. Venus.
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 Whose nakshatra is it in?
Purvashata, Venus.
Venus. See that. Now use Venus as a lagna. Whose results, what kind of yoga does the Mars-Jupiter combination form from there?
9-10.
9-10 again. Do you see? No, I'm sorry. It's
It's not 9-10.
It can't be 9-10.
5-10, right?
Yeah.
From Leo, Mars rules the 10th, Jupiter rules the 5th. Yes?
Yes.
No, from Leo, Venus rules the 10th.
Venus rules the 10th.
From Leo, Jupiter rules the 5th and Mars rules.
I'm sorry, Mars rules the 9th and 4th, right?
Yes, Mars is Raja Yoga Karaka from Leo, yes.
Again, that's the point. So Venus, period, Vargotama Venus. And remember, in the second house of the voice, and remember that what happens to this second Lord Sun, focal point of the Shubha Upachara Yoga, this is how you become a famous vocalist. Very, very interesting chart from that standpoint. But again, life defining moment, his operatic career begins to great success, of course, great acclaim, in his Venus-Rahu period. Now, again, just to show you, if you just go by 6-8 relationship here in either chart, you just use that as a, sort of a blind dogmatic principle, you'd go wrong here. Whose results does Rahu, or I'm sorry, start with Venus, okay?
In an exchange with Saturn.
That's it. That's it. Venus has strength here, again in the second house of the voice, exchanging with the second Lord. Right? And Rahu's giving whose results?
Sun.
Sun. See the Sambandha indirectly?
Yeah.
It's a Shubha Vosa Yoga here in the Shansha.
It is. Good. Questions? Then we'll move on. Okay. Have a look at this chart. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, or I shouldn't say it that way. Tell me what you see as being notable features.
And Shubha Ubayachara Yoga with the 11th house as the focal point.
Again, yes. Now, right. What else?
You have that special Raja Yoga with 3 malefics in the Trishadaya houses. So you've got Rahu and Saturn in the 3rd and the Sun in the 11th.
Correct. It's, particularly what you want to have is you have the Trishadais. Well, if you were saying the one where you've got mostly malefics and Trishadais and then all the benefics and angles, that doesn't count, right? But the fact that you've got a couple of malefics collecting in the 3rd Trishadai does. And you'll see that it's appropriate in this case.
Once again, you have Mars and, you have Mars debilitated, but aspected. Forget that.
Well, you bring up the idea that Mars is in its debilitation time. Is there any factor for cancellation?
Dispositor is exalted.
And in the Kendra.
And in a Kendra, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one. Any other? This is, I would consider this a weaker one, but it still adds to the
dispositor of the exaltation point, where it's, in this case, Saturn.
It's aspected by its exaltation lord. Is this what you're highlighting?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, this is an important thing to consider because, who's the Lagna lord here?
Mars.
And, what kind of combination is the Saturn-Mars?
It's 1-4 combination.
1-4 combination, right? So there's an angle triangle combination here, but of course Mars as the Lagna lord in the 9th. You see, this is important to see. Now, because, Mars, I'll show you charts, Mars as the Lagna lord in the 9th, if there's no cancellation, that doesn't really produce much of a Raja Yoga, as a 1-9 combination like this normally would. But what really changes this picture is the disposited by the exalted 9th lord in an angle. Is the moon still reasonably bright? At more than half full?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So now, which dasha was, it's a woman, by the way, which dasha was this person born in?
Moon dasha.
Born in the moon dasha, balance of dasha?
Must be about a third or so.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
under a
yeah.
third.
About third left. About a third left.
Okay.
So perhaps
More,
about 3 years or so.
Yeah, actually, just 3 years probably. I would say.
Okay. Followed by how many years of Mars?
7 of Mars.
So she's going to start to be in her teenage years, yes?
Hmm.
And then followed by
18 of Rahu.
18 of Rahu. So you run Rahu, and then Rahu Jupiter, and then Rahu Saturn. Right? Now, think about what we said about Rahu Saturn, and think about what house they're in.
The third house.
Mm-hmm. And then think about what these planets become from a strong Chandra Lagna.
Ninth.
Raja Yoga Karaka.
Raja Yoga Karaka, with again Mars Saturn forming an angle trine combination, yes?
Hmm.
What do you think might have happened? Young girl in her late teens?
Career takes off in sports or performance.
Career takes off in performance, it wasn't sports.
Okay.
When a young girl in her late teens is earning from performance, what's maybe a logical conclusion about the profession?
Musician.
Musician or actor, actress.
It's an actress. An actress.
Because of Rahus.
But now come to so she dons Rahu Saturn, followed by Rahu Mercury, Rahu Ketu, followed by Rahu Venus, right? Now she's in her early 20s. Venus in the 10th.
Also the 10th Lord from Rahu.
Also the 10th Lord from Rahu as the Yoga Karaka planet. Now, Venkat, note that these two grahas are 6-8.
Yep. Yeah, again, yes.
6-8, but now, see the Shamsha. Now consider the Rahu in this period.
That changes it completely.
Yeah.
Well, it adds to the picture. I don't know if it changes it. It
No,
certainly
change. What I mean by changes is it completely tilts us to on the positive side, being in the Lagna Rahu, and aspected by
just in the
yeah,
Lagna? Just in
Lagna.
In
Lagna,
Aquarius.
yeah, in Aquarius, and that too aspected by the 10th Lord, and then Venus, then again aspected by the 10th Lord, Swakshetra. It's a pretty good picture.
Rahu in the Lagna. Think about the significance of grahas when you run that period in the Lagna. Now, in this case, of course, Rahu is in its Mudra sign. Probably haven't emphasized this enough, but you want to always see in this case what happens to the Lagna Lord too. Notice that it's well placed in a trine. Venus now becomes Yoga Karaka planet, Swakshetra, in an angle, aspected by two other benefics, and in a mutual glance with the 10th Lord. It's a 9-10.
Yeah.
You see?
Mhm.
Could you design a better picture for Rahu Venus? This is the chart of Brigitte Bardot, French actress Brigitte Bardot, who in the Rahu Venus period appeared in this movie called And God Created Women, and became this huge international star and sex symbol during this time. Rahu Venus. But you'd have to see the Shamsha, right? This is what I was trying to emphasize in the article so much. You'd have to see the Shamsha to understand how this period. Now, success as an actress in the Rahu period, starting in Rahu Saturn, by the way, is very apparent, very obvious. But, the special significance of Rahu Venus is very apparent from the standpoint of the D10, as it typically was in all the examples that we've seen.
And also the quadrant lords are in their own houses.
Sorry?
Except for Venus, Sun, and Mars.
And you just think about how strong this D10 is. Wow, when it's moved to corner sign, Venus in its own sign, Moon in its own sign, Sun exalted, Mars in its own sign.
Venus is associated with another Saraswati yoga in Dashamsha.
There's Saraswati yoga in the Shamsha involving Venus.
Mark, just an observation. I remember somewhere you mentioning that yogas based on house lordship are to be taken with a pinch of salt in divisional charts.
Well, I don't overemphasize it, but you're saying, do I feel it's a valid point of view? It's a valid thing to do. My answer is yes. Right?
Okay.
But what I'm also emphasizing is the angular and trine positions of grahas in divisional charts, particularly if in strength, for being able to give good results.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
Mark, how old is this person now? I mean, roughly.
Brigitte Bardot?
Yeah.
Oh God, she was. She's got to be in her. Is she still alive? She's got to be in her 80s, maybe 90s.
Oh. Did she ever have children?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so moving on here. Moving on. Well, let's see. She was 23 years old in 1957.
Okay.
So pretty old. If she's still alive, I don't even know if she's still alive.
Yes, she's alive. She's 82, and she said she has one child. It says.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now you made me curious. Why did you ask?
Jupiter goes into the 12th, aspected by Saturn and Mars, and the 5th house is aspected by Saturn.
Right. So pretty afflicted 5th house, 5th lord.
Yeah.
Right. So couldn't have been a lot of children, couldn't have been the best experience with children either, right? Okay. Look at this chart.
Mark, Venkat is not going to be too happy with you today. You're pulling up charts only with the 6-8 Rahu-Venus combination.
It's
not my happiness, Rohit. It's just an observation that it.
Well, no,
I'm just joking.
We're joking. We're joking about this, but it's because if you see some general guidelines that I've given that are just classical guidelines for interpreting period and subperiod, two planets 6-8 from each other, it would be considered not a favorable factor, right?
Sure.
But again, the point is, and they may not be for some things, but the point is that if you just use that dogmatically and say terrible period, you'd see how wrong you would go with regards to these, depending on how you find terrible or good. Clearly from an objective reality standpoint, in terms of what happened to a person's career, name, and fame during this time. But sometimes that has its own side collateral experiences that aren't that good. But I just don't know. All I know is that these periods prove to be very special as far and momentous in terms of the developments in their career life.
Also, the point you mentioned at the start of today's webinar: thesis, counter-thesis, synthesis.
Synthesis, right? That's true. So, folks, I can't for the life of me. Okay, all right. So, take a look at this chart, and what do you like about it? I mean, what's notable about it? What stands out to you?
Again, the Mars debilitated, aspected by Moon, which cancels the debilitation.
Saturn's mutual glance helps, right?
Yeah.
It looks like it's probably also part of that Prasha's exception. Dushtana house and Jupiter being Vargodama looks fairly strong. I mean, it's placed 11th and Vargoda makes it strong, so Lagnor is strong.
Could be. Not so much concerned about them. Actually, Mars we'll come back to this. First of all, there's an unbelievable combination in this chart that you won't find that often. that really speaks to what this person became in terms of her stature. So it's a woman.
Well, the thing is, it's the 9-10 Raj Yoga, and it has a benefic hemming on both sides.
That's it. See this combination, folks.
Part of a
Best Raja Yoga for Sagittarius, and falling together in the 10th house, where Mercury is in its exaltation sign, and the Sun gets, of course, what kind of strength?
Tikbala.
Dikbala. Then you add to
Direction.
that, the benefic hemming that then is producing a Shubha Upacharya Yoga.
Yes.
Quite the configuration.
Two things that catch your eye right at the first instance. One is this one. The second is the negative one, which is the super afflicted moon.
Moon has some real problems, right?
Major, yeah.
And you're right. Absolutely does.
And no help, like no benefic aspect onto it.
There's no, well, you have to consider something though. You have to consider some factor that is actually provides some major relief here.
Jupiter and Kendra from Moon.
Jupiter and Kendra, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, Jupiter and Kendra, and is it any old Jupiter?
Bardot Jupiter.
Bardot Jupiter. That changes the picture. I mean, it modifies the picture, but you're right. It's a very afflicted moon. It's more than half bright, and it's waxing, but it's with Saturn, Rahu, Ketu axis, and Mars. And
the degrees are very, very close.
Yes, that's a very close conjunction, very close aspect. And in terms of some of what this person experienced in their Mars period, like in what period were they born?
Mars.
In the Mars period. And when I talked about this person in some of their life history, early life history in particular, you can see that there was, in terms of what house is getting afflicted here?
Second house.
Second house, family.
Family, could influence the financial state. I mean, the good state is later in life. I mean, Saturn as the second lord is in the second house, but, you have moon turns, it gives its results by association here as the eighth lord, but you've got affliction here. You've got Rahu, Ketus, and you've got Mars, no question. And so, anybody have any idea who this horoscope is?
Sophie, Loren?
It's Sophia Loren, right? Did you see my note?
Yep.
I'm not going to be impressed, okay? You're not going to get away with that, Rowie. She was a child during war-torn Italy. And, I forget what happened to her family, but she was like this street urchin. They were very poor, she had I think she got raped. It was very, some of what her experience was in the very early life was just reflective of this kind of heavy-duty combination. But then, of course, after Mars, she moves into Rahu, and she makes her film debut as an actress. She first starts to gain some recognition for acting in her Rahu-Venus period, which, again, is clearly indicated here.
Wow.
I mean, clearly indicated in terms of the Rahu-Venus period being significant as far as developments in her status in career life. Them being together here in the D10 with, again, Rahu having quite a good dignity, falling in a good house, aspect of Jupiter, Swakshetra, right, additionally. So this sub-period was fairly easily identifiable as being significant this way, but again, Rahu and Venus in a 6-8 relationship in the birth chart, right? But Venus also being a part of that Shubha Upacharya Yoga has to be, in terms of the kind of results Venus is going to give. Of course, that had to bring about an increase in her financial status, of course, which it would have. with Venus as the 11th lord and the 9th. So all these are examples of Rahu-Venus, Venus-Rahu being momentous periods in a person's life. And you can see that to some degree, some more, some less, they all fit the parameters that I was laying out in the article as to how you would judge such periods to be particularly special. But now, look at this chart. Of course, you all recognize this name and probably seen this chart many times. And to some way of thinking, I mean, Rahu-Venus did prove to be not in a way in which all the other examples. If you were evaluating Rahu-Venus here, what is the real downside?
The planetary war of Venus with Mars.
Which actually Venus wins here if you use the theory of brightness, which I'm favoring. But nonetheless, I mean, I'm here to tell you that two planets involved in planetary war both suffer, okay? But I don't think that specifically is not the problem in my view. What is the real issue here with
aspect of Saturn onto Venus?
Well,
and Mars.
The double affliction, folks.
Yeah.
And think about the closeness of this. You know, Venus and Mars is within lesser degree, could hardly be more conjunct. And Saturn at 21 degrees is, you know, also a very, very close aspect. And keep in mind that Venus is the Lagna Lord here. It's a very, very afflicted Lagna Lord. And what's its position? Where does it fall? Which house?
7th house.
The Maraka.
Becomes a Maraka house, and then what is its status in terms of a kind of a graha? Is it natural benefic or natural malefic?
Well, in this case, I think Parashara goes out of his way to say that this is not won't help the Lagna in this case, right?
Oh, you're thinking of Taurus, okay?
Oh, it's the Taurus. Okay, sorry.
Because it becomes a Mula Trikona 6th lord from Taurus. But what you know, it's going to give its results probably by association, but what I'm leading up to here is how a natural benefic in the 7th can become the surest killer when the Ayus is up. Who's and he Rahu Venus, whose result is Rahu giving?
Mercury.
Mercury, I mean, it gets a lot of different influences, but Mercury as its dispositor is certainly going to be a big factor in that. So now you have two. It's like saying Mercury Venus to some degree, which is then the period and sub-period of two benefics, afflicted, heavily afflicted, in the Maraka 7th house. So this period brought his downfall, and it was during this period that he committed suicide so as not to be captured by the Allies. Does anybody know what happened, what he did just before he died, moments before he committed suicide?
Got married.
He married.
He married.
Got married.
He married his longtime mistress, Eva Braun.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. Rahu Venus gets him married, and you know, then they commit a double suicide shortly thereafter. In the Rahu Venus period, it certainly was a momentous period, but not in the way in which all other examples. And you know, I wanted to show you this chart because, you know, when I wrote this article, one of the students who's been reading my articles and someone who had a conversation with K and Rahu once about Rahu Venus, Venus Rahu periods, you know, they can be bad too. You know, again, depending upon the Rahu and the Venus, always, as in this case. Right? And the reason the whole discussion was of interest to him. Oh, well, actually, before I'll come to that, but I wanted to show you this as well. You know, there's some question about the. I don't have the chart. No, this is the chart I'm talking. This is, forget this. This is the man that I was talking about. Okay, he's a student. He's involved in the Jyotish Journey program. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Indian fellow, now living in the U.S. And I'll just start out by saying that had this person come to me prior to their Rahu-Venus period, I may have very well misjudged it. But now keep in mind, what we just saw with regards to the previous chart. What's similar here when you consider the idea of Rahu-Venus?
This double affliction by Mars and Saturn
Yes, these double afflictions
onto Venus.
by Mars and Saturn. But now, if you just applied some of those parameters that I was talking about in the birth chart, seeing, the particular Rahu and particular Venus, you see Rahu in its Mula Trikona sign, right? Venus in its own sign, Malavya Yoga and some other, major angle trine combinations. And then if you saw it in Navamsha, Venus is in occultation sign, Rahu is in Venus's sign, so there's some banda there. Okay? And then if you saw it in Dashamsha, all right, Rahu is Vargotama, not very well placed in terms of a angle trine type of situation, but does have source of strength. Venus is not particularly remarkable here, right? So
but then the 11th house factor comes into the thing. Venus is the 11th lord and Rahu is 11th from Venus into the Shamsha. So he could be making good money this time.
Well, first it was Rahu-Venus, not Venus-Rahu.
Oh, sorry.
Okay? And that's the point. He expected this period to give better results, particularly financial, and it didn't. I don't think it was awful, okay, but it did not deliver the kind of results that he expected it to. And one of his questions to me, and I think to Mr. Rao when he talked to him in Delhi, is why. And I don't have a lot of explanation about it other than the strong afflictions. The strong afflictions, I think, it really changes or tones down this, kind of the results. Take away these afflictions, and my point is, or my thesis is that it's a much better period.
Yeah.
I wanted to. So anyway, before we run out of time, what I want to spend a lot of time, and now, everything we've been looking at from the standpoint of retrospective analysis, okay? But now I want to share screen. And, I've got to collapse this here. So, it's been very interesting, folks. Oftentimes when I do a research and then I write an article based on that research, I've noted that then birth charts start coming to my attention. And it's like the cosmos says, here, you researched this, now take a look at this. What do you think? And this is what exactly happened, after I wrote this most recent article. I get contacted nearly every day by someone writing me, usually in very distressed circumstances, wanting my input astrologically. And let me get the Shamsha up here, or not Navamsha up here first. And this was the case here. This is a chart of an Indian gentleman living in India. And he is very frustrated because he's now in his mid-30s, or starting to be in his mid-30s. He wanted to marry and have children, and he's not been able to do that. And he's a Ayurvedic doctor and been struggling.
Rahu-Venus should definitely give him children.
Well, hold on. You'll notice that as fate would have it, then starting in January 2018, he's actually going to move into Rahu-Venus period. So, first of all, just look at this chart as a whole. What are some notable features about it before we just get into the analysis of this period and sub-period coming up? favorable, unfavorable, notable yogas, anything that you see that is of significance.
Looks like Venus is
110 Raj Yoga in the 9th house.
So we have the Lord of the first house, Saturn, with the 10th Lord in the 9th house. Right? Okay.
The mutual aspect of the 5th and the 11th Lord, Jupiter and Mercury, and both of them are Swashetra, which is
right. That would normally produce what kind of a very excellent combination?
That should produce an excellent combination for wealth.
In fact, those have been in my Rahu Yoga program when I was doing those the commentary on the Dhan Yoga chapter in Prashahora. This is among those combinations that are indicated not just for affluent, could produce great wealth. And
great wealth, yes.
Some of you may remember the chart of Phyllis Rashad, the actress who played opposite Bill Cosby in the Cosby Show, has this same combination. And she's worth many, many millions. What's the problem with this combination? How does it, what if anything is the problem here?
The combustion as well as the planetary war. I think that is.
And one more factor on the other side.
Saturn aspect in Jupiter.
Saturn aspected onto Jupiter.
Well, what about Jupiter itself?
It's retrograde.
It's retrograde.
Right. Now, this person has not run these periods, although he's been running Rahu that gives results in Venus, right? And I'm telling you that thus far, it has, if you said that he has a combination in his chart for great wealth, he would laugh in terms of what his life experience has been thus far. You see how this yoga gets blemished or gets changed. The interpretation changes.
Yep.
Based on all of these factors that you all so quickly saw. Very important to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that the combination is going to give no fruit, but the quality of the fruit or the magnitude of the fruit is going to be affected.
But Mark, I have a question. I mean, Saturn here being Lagna Lord, exalted. I mean, I understand that it's a natural malefic, but it's aspect onto Jupiter actually forming an aspectual Dhani Yoga.
Well, there's always two, there's both ways to look at it. It's an affliction to Jupiter. It has to be an affliction. And again, this idea that just because a planet's exalted or has a good lordship, that as a natural malefic, that somehow that doesn't then create an affliction or less of an affliction. I've tried to emphasize to you all that I just don't, that's not what I see.
Okay.
That's not the effect that I see. It's malefic and it's actually the aspect of a strong malefic. Now, you say that might create some aspectual sort of, 1, 2, 1, 11 combination could be, but from one standpoint, insofar as his having the idea of children being delayed in his life, I would one of my explanations for that is the aspect of Saturn onto the natural Karaka Jupiter.
Right.
So, Mark, with the concept of a retrograde planet being stronger, does that help Jupiter resist a little bit of Saturn's aspects, or not necessarily?
Well, there's this idea that retrograde planets have a source of strength in the sense that Chestabala in the shot by a six strength calculation, it receives a full additional rupa. And some people really emphasize that principle. K and Rahu really never did. Do I think it's potentially valid? Yes. But what I also know about retrograde planets is that they behave unreliably and erratically, and sometimes give quite the reverse of what their promise is. And I've tried to highlight a number of examples in my programs about this. It's unreliable this way. Now, you see what happens when he runs the Jupiter Mahadasha, which he's going to, right? But now, sometimes you get lucky as an astrologer in that someone approaches you about a question or concern that you happen to be able to give them input of the kind that they want to hear. Okay? So this guy's question is, will I marry? And if so, when will I marry? And of course, he'd like to hear that it's relatively soon. And then think about this potential from the standpoint of the Rahu-Venus period. Besides being Rahu-Venus, what further makes these grahas quite eligible to bring this event?
Venus is the seventh lord in Navamsha.
Venus is the seventh lord in Navamsha. Where does Rahu go in the Navamsha?
Yeah.
Navamsha Lagna.
Navamsha Lagna. Who is Venus conjunct in the birth chart that helps it, brings this idea as well?
Seventh lord.
Seventh lord.
It's also the seventh lord from the moon.
Also the seventh lord from the moon. Now, the fact that the seventh house from the moon has these two malefics is one of the reasons why there could be some delay in marriage, as well as the fact that the seventh lord of Navamsha is strongly under the influence of Saturn, as people can see, right? But also has additional benefic influence. So I think it's, I see it as being more of a question of delay than of denial, but the time has come. The time has come, and then, what would you want to do? If you saw that indication in Vimshotri, what would you more sophisticated Jyotishis want to do?
Charadasha.
Charadasha. So he moves into Rahu-Venus in January of 2018. It's a 3-year period. If you were trying to refine that time-wise more and trying to use Charadasha to do that, what would be your observation? Who is the DK here?
The sun.
The sun.
Who happens to be the seventh lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
And see which major period that he's running.
Virgo. Yeah.
What strikes you?
Yeah.
The seventh house from Virgo gets and its seventh house gets the aspect of 4 grahas, including the DK and Venus.
And Venus. Karaka Venus and DK both. And then which sub-period coming up overlaps with when he's moved into Rahu-Venus?
Virgo.
Virgo. Do you like it? Does it appeal to you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Appeals to me. Now, why don't we just quickly check in Yogini? And in a similar time frame, what strikes you? Running major period of Mercury. Mercury is also conjunct the seventh lord in the birth chart. And is the fifth lord in the fifth house? Venus is in the fifth house. Does it appear that he will marry and have children?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mercury sun.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. So in that sense, I can, very confidently, and of course, I would use, those of you who've taken my Jamie courses, I'd see it in Padanavamsha Dasha as well as an additional 4th cross-check. Now coming to transits, what strikes you?
Saturn is going to be in the 7th house, and Jupiter would have moved into...
No, wait a second. Saturn in the 7th house?
No. Sorry. Saturn would be in the 11th house, aspecting the 7th lord.
And?
In 2018.
And
Jupiter would be that time in Libra, aspecting the 7th lord.
That's it. Our prediction is made. So we'll make it, and God will laugh, and we'll see what happens. Okay, marriage and children for this man, but now he wants to be doing better career-wise. Can we give him any support that way? I'm bringing up the Shamsha. That's Dwada Shamsha. I keep putting up the wrong chart here. That should be it. Rahu-Venus in Dashamsha. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Why?
It's the 9-10 Raj Yoga in the second house that Venus is involved in. And Rahu also giving the result of Venus. So it's pretty obvious.
Note, Venkat, that they're 6'8" from each other.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I made that comment on the wrong day.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's an important thing to bring up. You know?
Yeah.
It's just that in this case, that wouldn't be your judgment because, you know, basically Venus, Rahu is exalted in the ninth here, giving Venus's results, forming a good combination, Swakshetra in its own sign. It's not, you know, the 6-8 idea is not going to, it's not that it won't apply, it's just that in this case, it's going to give a good result.
I think, Venkat, you're bringing it up, and us focusing on it like this will help none of us to jump to that conclusion. So I think it's very nice of you to bring it up.
I agree.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, again, quoting K.N. Rao, early on I used to hear him say it all the time. Astrology is no push button affair. Okay, it's not like there's one principle that you use dogmatically and you apply it every time, and it's always going to produce the same result. As he would say, you'll land in disaster. Land in disaster. So we have to do what Parashara says, uapapatu, which means we have to weigh up different factors, and this is why, you know, Jyotish is no simple affair, and it's not easy. But by seeing many examples, saturated experience, you learn how to make these more fine, nuanced assessments that can be accurate. So this man will be, I'm going to tell this man that a panel of many, over 20 distinguished Jyotishis, I consulted with a panel of over 20 distinguished Jyotishis, and they uniformly agree that he's getting married, having children, and his career is going to improve. He'll be absolutely thrilled. And then when it doesn't come true, I'll hear from him and I'll blame you guys.
I got bad counsel.
I got bad input. My panel failed me. So this is our webinar for today, folks. We had some great participation. I really appreciate it. As usual, we'll end with our Sanskrit prayer.
Mark, I have one question. Sorry, but
Sure.
one question.
Okay, it's okay.
I have a theory, and I just want to find out if you've noticed this or not. Have you found that Raj Yogas in the 11th house give a more pronounced effect as compared to other houses?
Well, it's a good, you know, you want to have your Raja Yoga combinations for the most part. Again, don't be dogmatic about this. You like to see them fall in angles and trines, and if they're not in angles and trines, I'd probably rather see them in the 11th house than any other.
Okay.
So, you know, but again, you don't be dogmatic about that. All depends.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So we'll conclude. Om Masato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityur Ma Amritam Gamaya Sarvesham Swasti Bhavatu Sarvesham Shanti Bhavatu Sarvesham Punam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone, until we all meet again. Namaste.
Thank you, Mark.